Resolved, all public high school students in the U.S. should be required to pass a national test to get a diploma. The number one excuse when the students fail tests is that they are not good test takers. Why is this always the reason? Do you think you maybe failed because you don't know the information? Testing today is huge in high school and even out of high school. People cannot use the excuse that they are bad at test taking, because if you know the information, you would not fail. Testing is to show what you know, not what you memorized. Also, just because you're bad at something doesn't mean we should get rid of it. Because in reality, tests are all over the real world, not only in school. We need students to practice test taking for the future. Way too many students pass courses when they don't even know the information. Test taking will prove this. It will let the students who deserve to pass to finish high school and the students who don't deserve to pass to stay in school and actually learn the information. Testing is a huge benchmark in our country. It makes it so we can see how well our students are in high school. It helps teachers improve too. If we don't have standardized testing, how will we measure our education levels? We couldn't. If you take a look at other countries like China, they do excellent in school. Do you know why? Because they spend a lot of their time in school practicing test taking. So what is their excuse? Many websites there is no such thing as a bad test taker. It is apparently from students. Carelessness and not knowing the information. So why is this an excuse in high school students around America?
Okay, negative, you have 6 minutes for questioning.
So my first question is, do you happen to know the symptoms of test anxiety?
I'm assuming it's just like any other anxiety where you start getting really frustrated or you start forgetting things. And I understand that that might be a problem, but that's something you have to work on, and anxiety goes away from practicing.
It's kind of like choking. You can't just choke away.
Okay, some symptoms there are not just like few, but there's a lot that can go on. Some physical would be headaches, nausea, excessive sweating, rapid heartbeat, and/or dry mouth. Emotional will be disappointment, anger, depression, uncontrollable crying or laughing, and feeling helplessness. Behavioral, fidgeting, pacing, substance abuse, and avoidance of anything that's around them. And thank you. Cognitive, racing thoughts, your thoughts going blank, not remember anything that you studied. Difficulty concentrating, negative self-talk, feelings of dread, comparing yourself to others, difficulty organizing your thoughts.
Wait, is that all the symptoms?
That's just some of them.
Okay, well, the thing I have against that is like you said, people who get anxiety from test taking usually don't know the information well enough, like whether they studied or not, because if you know what you're doing on a test, you wouldn't even have to study. That means you know the information, not you're trying to memorize it. And like even in speech class too, like people get anxiety going up there, but they get better as they go. It's practice. So if you keep practicing test taking, that anxiety won't be there anymore. That's not a permanent thing.
But do you think it's fair for even a smart person, or like a person that knows all our facts, and a person that doesn't still like get through? Do you think it's fair that any type of person have to go through all of this just to at least get a decent grade or pass, or not being able to focus because of these symptoms?
Well, I feel like mainly like a lot of the smarter or the people that get higher grades, it's because they do study a lot. I mean, yeah, some people are naturally smarter, but it also could just be because they do take the time to study, and I feel like a lot of people that get the anxiety are the people that don't study well enough, and they go into the test being like, oh my god, I don't know what I'm doing, and that's when the anxiety comes in, and that's when they don't remember anything.
And this is all like, they're starting us early so we get prepared for in the future so we don't choke back.
Okay. Do you know what causes test anxiety?
I'm assuming not knowing the information, because you're memorizing it when you study. But if you study enough, that's when you start knowing the information. If you're just memorizing something, you're not gonna memorize it for that long.
I think that cramming is a huge piece of anxiety because you're trying so hard to get all the information in, and you're trying so hard that it's just building up stress, that you're not really getting information, you're just getting more stressed as you're cramming, studying the night before.
Yeah, and that's something you have to learn to like do. So.
Okay, well, I have some listed down of what typical would be past negative experiences while taking tests. Experience or fearing that they will have a blank on the test or leaving a blank on the test and not answering anything at all, getting points marked down anyways. Worrying about anxiety itself, being overwhelmed with what is going on, and negative thoughts throughout everything that's going on in that process. And do you know how many people have test anxiety in just the United States?
I'm assuming a lot. I don't know, but I'm assuming a lot.
Over 18% of the U.S. adult population does. About 3/4 have anxiety before they're 21 and a half years old. Over 3% or 6.8 million have generalized anxiety, which is regular. And about 2.7 or 6 million have panic disorders.
Do you know what effects high-stakes testing has on students' or teachers' attitudes or on the climate of learning?
What effect it has on their attitudes? Well, attitude is all in like personal, like how you are, so that varies on the person. Like if you're looking at the test and giving it a bad attitude, you're probably not going to do as well, or you're going to choose not to memorize or know the information as well. But like you said, it's all attitude, so I feel like you can't really, that's like your personal reference, that's on everybody.
So, like when, even like teachers, when students get bad grades on their test, they feel ashamed or embarrassed that their students scored low. They also, when their students do score high, they feel relieved rather than proud of the scores that they get. And then they, throughout the whole thing, there's more stress, paperwork, and decreased reliance on their professional judgment. So they don't rely so much on like their actual teaching skills. They rely more on what the state is giving them to teach on, which is basically teaching to the test. And a lot of teachers don't agree with that.
30 seconds.
Do you think it is fair that teachers are measured by the scores of their students?
In a way, yeah, but in another way, no. If you have students that don't try at all, obviously that's unfair, but you're going to get that everywhere. You're going to get some students that try and some students that don't try, and you can't ever stop that. That's just something that's always there.
In a lot of high-stakes testing, all the scores, the teachers are measured for it, so some teachers lose their jobs because of the scores that students get, and again, students have bad days, and they could have a test on a bad day. So.
Time. Your team has 2 minutes for your
We
constructive.
got the first word, we get the last word.
Please don't be like that.
Result. High school students shouldn't have to take standardized testing. Just imagine, you're sitting in a silent room, there's a big test sitting right in front of you. You need to pass it. You need to get a good grade. Then you start to think, what if I don't pass? What if I don't get into the college I want? Then the room starts to get smaller. Your heart starts to pound so fast and you start freaking out. You start to double think your answers that you've already put down on your paper. All that studying and information that you had in your head is now in the back of your head. You can't think straight, and you only have a few minutes left to finish your test. Your pencil breaks, your calculator dies. Now what are you going to do?
Okay, 6 minutes for questioning.
Okay. I know, I'll like pass it down. Okay. You say not everyone is good at test taking. Well, shouldn't it be about time that people actually learn the skill? Because it's a life skill, it's not just a school skill.
A lot of the tests that people take, especially the high stakes tests, they're learning they're not learning the actual testing that it takes to pass life, I guess you could say. Like, they're not learning in-depth questions, so they're not critical thinking, they're not doing anything that makes it hard to, like, think about something that, in-depth question. Like, all they're getting asked is questions that have multiple choice answers, and then questions that have to do with, like, science-related things. And I know that, like, that's important, but a lot of the tests that people are taking for high stakes have nothing to do with, like, in-depth answers or stuff that you actually have to talk about, or critical thinking, so stuff that you have to solve problems about that not have anything to do with, like, math or science.
Well, the standardized testing that it said on our card for the debate said math, science, social studies, and English. So you would be getting, I mean, because not every test is set up the way you think. A test does not have to be written. That doesn't make it a test just because it's written or because it's multiple choice. So it could have critical thinking, like it could have any of those things, and it could have every subject on it, so I don't think that really matters. You want to ask a question?
I have a question.
Oh, okay, we'll get it back.
So you guys keep saying like anxiety is a huge thing that's bad about test taking, but I think anxiety in itself is a problem. So what would you think would be a better approach to handling test anxiety rather than getting rid of tests? Because you can't blame the entire test itself on anxiety. I mean, that's more of an inner problem, so.
I think that basically, like, so much pressure is put on a student with high stakes testing, because usually when it is considered high stakes, they have to pass this test for graduation, or they have to pass it to go to the next grade level. So that puts more pressure on the kid, which higher their test anxiety. So if you just get rid of that pressure, then I think a lot of the anxiety will go down, because they don't have to worry as much about passing. They have to still worry about passing the test, but they don't have to worry about passing it to get to the next grade or to graduate with the rest of their class.
And I think that standardized testing, like, we're not just talking about regular tests, we're talking about this test that we need to pass, and if we don't pass, we're in trouble. We're not talking about just like regular in-school tests too. And there's a huge difference between standardized testing and regular tests in school.
Okay, it says, the next question is, your main excuse is the anxiety, or, you know, you're not good at test taking. But just because you're not good at something doesn't mean you can just throw it away in life. Like, when you go to get a job in the future, a lot of professional jobs require you to take a standardized testing showing that you can get the job, like in math or whatever the subject is that you're going to work for. So what's the excuse then when you go out of school and you didn't practice enough testing in school, and then when you go to find a job, you're not good at the skill now because you didn't practice enough?
I don't think that you should get rid of testing altogether, so you would still have practice testing, like you would still practice testing in school. I think that the main thing that is people are not passing these tests, so they're staying behind grades, and these tests are like geared towards certain people to answer the questions, so it's harder for like lower schools or like schools in more like lower income places to pass these tests. So when, like, you will still be able to have these testing skills when you go out. It's just the thing where you don't want these high stakes to determine like whether you graduate or go on to the next.
Yeah, I understand that too, but like I said, when you're getting a job, it is a high stake test. It is, if you fail that mathematics test or you fail whatever you're taking for that job, they're not going to hire you. So you have to learn that skill of taking high stake tests. Like, that's just what you do in real life. So
Kids pass classes when they honestly shouldn't. Testing students proves their competencies. Why should we let these kids pass when they never learned?
It's not so much that they haven't learned, it's just they can't, like, just, if they remember it, it's just hard for them because it's not, I don't know how to put it, like, they have learned it, it's just, they're just so nervous, they can't remember it, and it, like I said, it gets pushed to the back of their head, and everything just goes away. they're like, oh, I know this question, and then they're like, maybe I don't, maybe it's this answer, but it could be this answer. But they know the information and they studied it, and they know it. It's not just memorizing; they know it. It just they can't remember it.
What about the kids who don't try, who say they just have the anxiety for the test and use that as an excuse?
30 seconds.
They probably still try, it's just when they go to take the test, it all erases in their head. I mean,
Well, I just feel like that's when memorizing comes in. Like, let's say if you were to take a test right now on addition, you know that 100%. Whether you have anxiety or not, you're going to remember 2 + 2. You're going to remember all those things. So if you're taking a test in a class where you actually know the information, you didn't just study, you didn't just memorize it, you
10
would
seconds.
know what you're doing. Anxiety wouldn't be a problem. Okay, we're good.
Time.
Do you want, like, these or something? You can read it. Oh.
2 minutes. Good.
You guys keep saying that anxiety is the problem, or that tests aren't really the best way to prove someone's, like, how smart they are. But it really kind of is, because, like, you're tested throughout life. Maybe you're not standardized tested or whatever. You're not, like, sat down at a desk with a pen and a paper. But throughout life, you're tested, your skills, and, like, your worth, and these tests are just kind of a way of doing that, but more of, like, the pressure that's put on you with these tests is the pressure of the fact that you want a reward from it. You want the best you can get from it, the best you can get out of yourself put on this test. And that's pressure put mainly on, like, from yourself, because you want the best out of this test. And I guess what I'm trying to say is you can't blame the test for anxiety. You can't blame the test for the pressure and the stress. You have to blame yourself if you're not studying, if you're not preparing so much for this test, then that's your own fault. Yeah. You also, like,
30 seconds.
Yeah, so you want the best that you can get out of this test, so you need to prepare for it. You can't say the night before, oh, I'm going to fail. I really wish I studied for months for this test so that I can get the best, because you have an opportunity to do your best, so you need to prepare for that, and then the stress will come easier.
Time. Two minutes.
So I understand that we're saying that you should study for these tests and then you wouldn't have test anxiety, but how many of us really study for this, like our SATs, or maybe not our SATs, but our the MCATs, like what Massachusetts takes for, it's like our the multiple choice test that we take every year, and we never study for it, and the teachers have to teach to this test, so they're not teaching things that they would rather be teaching. They're teaching things that would be directly on the test, nothing that would help the student go further in life, or critical thinking problems, no problem solving. And if we just get rid of the high stakes, then there would be no problem with kids having the test anxiety, because they wouldn't have so much pressure put on them. They'd be able to take the test without the problems of, oh wow, I'm gonna fail, I'm gonna not pass this grade, I'm not gonna graduate, and then they're gonna have their self-confidence lowered, then they're gonna be probably fall into depression, because who doesn't want to graduate with their class, and then after that, it's a bad circle.
30
And
seconds.
so I just think that even if you don't get rid of testing, just the high stakes part testing, it would be fine.
Okay, affirmative summary and closing, 2 minutes.
Okay. I think testing is really important, whether it's a high-stake testing or just a regular testing, because either way, they're both tests. It's just how you look at it. And I understand that you might be pressured more, I guess, if you know it relies on you graduating or not. But at the same time, that's when studying comes in. In Rachel's rebuttal, she was saying that not a lot of people study for SATs, but I know she didn't mean it like that. She just meant like generalized bigger tests. But that's the problem. That's exactly what the problem is. People don't study. She just admitted to it, and that's where the anxiety comes in, because you don't study enough. And like I said, studying too is just a memorizing thing. You have to study enough, not just the night before. It has to be a long period of time. That's when you actually know information. If you're just memorizing it, just because you study one night, you don't know the information then. Because psychologists do say that when you learn things, you think you know them, but you forget 90% of the stuff the next day. So if you actually study for hours multiple times a day or throughout a week or whatever, you will actually learn information. It's not just a memorizing game anymore. And Rachel was also saying that a lot of the stuff that the tests are, well, what are on the test, the teachers don't even want to teach, or they're not critical thinking, or they're nothing you're going to use for the future. But that all depends on who you are as a person, because not everyone's going to go into the same field. You might be taking a test on English, and a lot of people are sitting there like, oh, I don't need to know this vocab, this is
30
important.
seconds.
But what if you're going into an English major? That will be important. So it all depends on the person's reference. So I feel like testing is important, and you really need to prepare for the real world, because when you are getting jobs, you will take high-stake testing like that. So in high school, it's a good way to prepare for it.
Okay, negative summary and closing, 2 minutes.
Overall, we should do away with high stakes testing. Kids and adults go through so much to study, but yet when they go to take the test, they just start to break down. People suffer from anxiety, and they get stressed out. You study because you want to better your grade and do well. But when you have testing anxiety, you can do nothing to stop that, and that will affect your grade. It's not just a couple kids, it's a lot that have testing anxiety and nervous breakdowns. So when you get to that studying point, you study the night before, or you study a couple days before, but it's the thought of getting that test in front of you and having to pass this to better your future or your grade that you tend to get nervous and you tend to forget all of your answers and what you studied. So what I'm trying to say is people overall, they do study, but sometimes they have that anxiety that nobody ever wants.